All right, let's do a completely hypocritical, out of context, anti-misogyny rant. Okay, so this one's for the incels and the tech bros and associated dog cunts out there. Okay, and also the fake jocks, who aren't really who are really tech bros, but they're incels. The incel mindset is not about whether or not you're a geeky or a jock. It's about whether or not you have basic respect and decency. So, the reason why they're involuntary celibates is because people don't want to F them. They don't want to F them because they're not effable. They're not effable because they lack basic respect and decency. They wind up in a vicious cycle where they blame those that don't want to F them, which is not respect or decency. And they get angry about it and they stir themselves up until they get into a bit of a tiz and they go, ah. And it's like, look, your toxic entitlement's behind the problem, okay? You lack respect and decency. So sometimes there are female incels, sometimes they're male incels. But 99% of the incels are men. An incel can be someone in a relationship as well. So this is what's confusing for what we might say with the incel propaganda, is that it typically refers to, oh, young men in their early 20s who spend too much time on 4chan. Not necessarily. Sometimes they're men who are in relationships and who are married as well. Usually they're younger, and it's their first marriage, but it doesn't necessarily follow that it has to be the case. So let's talk about that one. Okay, here's an example of an incel. If you ever experienced sleep rape as a form of domestic violence, then you would know what an incel is. You'd be well aware of it. They're claiming that in that situation that you're not putting out enough or whatever excuse they're making for it. If you ever experienced that, sorry if you ever have. It's a horrible thing for anyone to go through. It doesn't sound particularly pleasant, does it? So sleep rape is a variety of roofie in the beer. Roofie in the beer has been known to occur in the gay community as well, at the club zone. So it isn't exclusively a heterosexual domestic violence phenomenon either. The idea is that the rapist has decided to make a criminal contact with someone who doesn't consent to it and obviously isn't able to, and is either creating a situation where they can't consent or taking advantage of a situation where they can't consent. So they've deliberately, in that scenario, done something without consent. So domestic violence is also when you're not in a relationship with someone. You can have lived with someone and have been raped by them through other means. So you're not in a relationship with them, but you might have lived with them and they might have abused you somehow. In that particular context, also potentially as a form of sleep rape as well. So this idea that some men, not all men, have, that it's okay to take advantage of someone who is inebriated or asleep, is toxic incel mentality. Those types of men are no different from Elliot Rogers, in the sense that they don't believe that respect or decency is the basis of an interaction with another person. They believe that it's his way or the fucking highway, and she can just put up with it. Or in the case of the gay community, when they have experienced roofies in the drink, he can just put up with it. So, whether you're a male or a female who's been raped when you're unconscious is a terrifying thing for that body to go through. That body is unable to defend, and in many cases, in pretty much all instances of the rapes, unaware that they've even experienced it. There might be some situations where you could wake up in the morning and your knickers are on the ground, or you don't know why they're there, or something doesn't feel quite right. Or in the horrible case of someone who experienced a roofie in the drink, They might have woken up in an alleyway with their pants around their ankles, their butthole bleeding, their wallet missing, and their face covered in bruises. That particular individual or individuals who've been through that sort of thing just described deserve enormous amount of sympathy and compassion. Not the kinds of homophobic slurs and bullying that you expect you to get from the alt-right, which has its fair share of incels, not just the left. So the important note to make there is that the incel behaviour is not left-wing or right-wing. It just seems to be more commonplace in what they call the alt-right pipeline. So let's continue. A person who experiences sleep rape, okay, isn't home for the event. Okay, they're not there, they're asleep. Okay? They're not causing it. They're not doing anything. They don't even know that's happened. The offender might do things like take photographs or videos. Again, while the victim is sleeping. And in some cases, in the case of domestic violence relationships, store them on their computer for their later amusement and enjoyment. The victim might not find out for years that it happened. The offender could be sneaky. And so how can somebody not be woken up by a rather disruptive moment like that? Well, the answer is that they might have done something extra when they're asleep to ensure that was the case. They might have been an offender who wasn't particularly well endowed. They might have been an offender who took a quick dip and then ran. It still qualifies as rape. And so that type of stuff is quite traumatic for the survivor. It can happen in more than one environment. So this is what becomes really scary for people who have ever experienced it, is that, or suspected that they experienced it, is that they don't know. They just don't know for sure. And that's what the offender's relying on. So if the photographs or video are discovered on the offender's computer, then of course there's a fight. The documents are deleted or demanded to be deleted. There's questions about whether or not they were distributed. Those are not clearly answered because the offender obviously has something to cover up. And a massive fear occurs about just how far and wide across the internet someone's private parts being assaulted when they're unable to defend themselves were distributed. They don't know. And because they don't know, they can't have closure. They can never get closure on the subject. So what they do is once they figure out in a domestic violence situation that that's what's happened to them, they move on. And they destroy everything that resembles the offender. And they cry for a few years. And then they get over it. And in the meantime, of course, they live their life and they try to live a much better life because, unsurprisingly, the sleep rape phenomena occurs with a cluster of other domestic violence symptoms, provocation, emotional bullying, financial control behaviour, gaslighting, denial of any other offences occurring, favouring of the offender over the victim in matters that don't make any sense, and so on and so forth. And so those types of behaviours are part of the domestic violence social dynamic. Typically, the offender is quite narcissistic and is able to, have some capacity to convince those in their social group that the one that they are offending as is some kind of problem. And so the others act as though they're flying monkeys and find other ways to belittle the victim as well. And so they experience it. They experience it from multiple attack points. And so that person, while they're awake, gets verbally abused by a group of people, and while they're asleep, gets sexually assaulted. And so, unsurprisingly, um, after a number of years in that particular dynamic, when a person finally is able to find out that that's what's happened to them, they leave the offender in an enormous state of fear of being stalked, by the way, and try to put back together the damaged pieces of the relationships that were lost due to that offender not allowing them to even contact their own family. Because part of a domestic violence tactic is your family's the problem and he's the solution type of thing, right? And so that type of thing, when someone like that becomes a Satanist or an esotericist, they might use rape as a form of energetic vampirism. Okay? And they could do so without even being in a relationship with you at all. And of course, it's always the victim's fault with people like that. And often what's quite amazing is even as those men might have bisexuality, homosexuality, or express openly a lack of homophobia, in practice they are often very much homophobic men. They're afraid of their own queerness, as it turns out, or any sign that their machismo has been chipped at. So the men who do those things or have thought about doing those things need to be aware that whether you're gay, straight, or bisexual, okay, you never have the right to go near anyone when they are asleep. You don't have the right to intoxicate someone so that you can take advantage of them. You don't have the right to see an unchaperoned person, a female perhaps, or someone that you perceive to be gay, and see them as a target. You don't have the right to butt cigarettes and use astral cords to flick bits of your energy into their heads so that you can demand to be their husband, until potentially teenage girls wind up committing suicide. That will not be the case ever again. You are not allowed to do things like that. Just because you found a way to get in someone else's space and give them crap, it doesn't mean you have the right to. If they don't give you permission, you don't have the right. If someone isn't home, you don't break into their house. You don't bring people into their house that they didn't ask to be there. You don't have a little party inside their house and start smashing up their walls and then blaming whatever hostages or convicts or whatever else you brought into their house either. You just plain don't do it. Okay? You leave that house. You leave those other people alone. You never, ever, ever put anything in their drinks. You don't take advantage of someone. You never, ever, ever do anything without consent. And if you ever have the attitude of not doing things without consent, then you're the problem. So where's the hypocrisy in saying those things? All those things are perfectly valid and legal things to say. Where's the hypocrisy? Well, the hypocrisy is that you don't actually comprehend the hypocrisy, do you? It's always hypocritical, isn't it, for a female to tell you about boundaries? Because boundaries are set by warriors, and warriors are men. So women aren't allowed to set boundaries, are they? That sounds like crap. Maybe men aren't warriors. Maybe men who think like that are stupid. And so incels are stupid people. You'll probably find those types of domestic violence offenders, whether you're in a relationship with them or not, are stupid people. They're people of low IQs and malfunctioning moral compasses. And because they're people of low IQs and malfunctioning moral compasses, you'll have trouble getting through them. They actually think that they are defending the victim from other people. They think they're defending the victim from other people while they're doing that. Can you believe that? There are men who are abusing women and other men who think they're defending them when they're doing that. Okay? No. No. Okay? And honestly, if you want to take this rant as everything else Canoe said wasn't true about SpaceX, cybernetic implants or whatever, okay, and just want to have hedge pin it and make it oversimplification, think again, it's not. The tech bros are so incel-like that they're at the point where they're privateering the US military to attack sleeping women because they destroyed a cybernetic implant. Sleeping women who'd already experienced sleep rape before. It wasn't apparition, it wasn't a hallucination, it was an actual fucking physical event. And if you want to twist that into some little hedge pin thing because you think, whoever you might be out there, there's got to be one simple explanation or another, then you're a moron. If you can't see the 4chan in what Musk did with the OPM, then you don't know what you're talking about. He was raping your government while you were asleep, and then you woke up screaming, going, "Get off of us!"